Mr. Riskett, and welcome back to another episode of the AE Modular Video Library, the series that takes a look at the wide range of modules available for the AE Modular system. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 8-step sequencer SEQ8 module. We'll be giving a general overview before diving into some demo patches towards the end. Before we begin, AE Modular is a small but ever-growing system, so if you find this video useful, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already, or consider supporting me on Patreon. The videos for this series can be found in a playlist on my channel and can be viewed in any order. Green thumbnails are used for official Tangible Waves modules, and pink thumbnails are used to cover third-party modules. With all of that said, let's now take a look at the SEQ8 module. Now, at the time of making this video, I don't have a SEQ16, which is kind of like the big brother version of this module. I just have the SEQ8, but it is more than capable and quite a really powerful little sequencer considering its size. It's got a lot of unique features that I think are really nifty, and we're going to be exploring all of those today. Now, before we patch anything in, let's just have a look at some of the inputs and outputs that we've got on this thing. We've got a clock input, a reset, and a mode CV, which we'll get into a little bit later on. We've also got bus gate, bus clock, bus start, and bus stop so that we can sync it up with external gear via MIDI. In terms of outputs, we've got a lot of different choices. We've got 3 CV outputs, which take the CV from these knobs, which are determined by this value. We'll get into explaining that a little bit more later on. Underneath that, we've also got several gate outputs, which we can trigger envelopes and other things with. And then underneath that, we've got CV raw, which pretty much takes the CV set by these 8 knobs and ignores the other knobs over here. You might have also noticed that there are 8 patch points along the top up here. These can be particularly useful for triggering certain things at certain times in your sequence, or you can patch them to the reset section so that you can just have like a 3-step sequencer or a 6-step sequencer. It's entirely up to you. We've also got a reset button here to reset the sequencer back to the starting position. We've got a switch down the bottom here, which allows us to switch between positive 5 volt range or positive 2.5 volt range if we don't want like really big increments, which can be particularly useful for bass lines. So what I'm going to do before we start demoing anything else is actually hook up a sequence just so that we can get a better understanding of what's going on. What I'm going to do is just control the frequency of the 555 over here. And maybe we'll just hook up CV raw to start with. We'll take the output of that sine wave and plug it into our mixer. Make sure everything's sort of turned back to 0. Cool, so we can hear our sine wave. Next up, we need to clock this. Now we will go over how to use external gear and a MIDI clock to clock this thing, but just for the time being, let's just use a simple square wave. So we've got a square wave at the top here. It's moving relatively quickly. Let's just plug it in to clock. Great, so now we can change the speed of the clock with the speed of the LFO. Cool. Now, if we turn this up and have a listen. Let's just raise the pitch of this a bit. So now we can control the CV values by twisting these knobs. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, let's explore what happens if we patch this from the top CV value and turn it up. Maybe I'll just slow down the LFO a bit here. So at the moment, we're just getting a single tone, even though these knobs are twisted into different positions. And that's because all of these knobs are turned down. Just mute that for now. So we can see over here that we've got CV2, 3, 4, and 5 all written in Roman numerals underneath these 4 knobs. And then there's a CV1, which is indicated by this red light. CV1 is kind of like the base position for whatever your oscillator is set at. And then we can twist these knobs to be in different positions maybe like so. And then if we twist these knobs to point to those different numbers, they're going to play the notes that we've already set up over here, which can be particularly useful when you're improvising, because it means that once you've set things up to sound the way you want them to with these 4 knobs, then you can rearrange the steps with twisting these ones. So let's now have a listen. If we twist this switch or switch this switch, you can hear that the pitch goes up a substantial amount. Now, if you look closely at the time being, you might notice that the gate light up the top here switches off when it gets to step 6. So I'm just going to twist a couple of these knobs around. And if you look carefully, you can see that the gate light isn't now flashing when all of these steps are lit up. And that's because I've twisted these knobs into the position of P, which is pause. So if we were to take our oscillator out, we'll plug it into a VCA, and then we triggered an envelope using one of the gate outputs. We can take our VCA into a wasp filter and then go from the wasp filter down into our mixer. Oops. And of course we need to trigger our VCA with that envelope. And maybe we'll use a square wave, just so it's a little bit more audible. So now we can sort of rearrange these steps, but we'll always have those same notes. Now, going back to what I said before, let's just say that we only wanted to have something like a 4-step sequence, for example. So we could take the output of step 5 over here and plug it into the reset. And now you can see that we're only getting the first 4 steps of our sequence. We could do this with any of the other numbers. And then you can put something like a drum beat underneath that and get some really cool polyrhythmic stuff happening. Before we go into clocking this in various different ways, what I next want to demonstrate is we'll just take an attenuator over here and we'll plug it into the mode CV section. I'm going to turn this all the way down, and then we'll switch this switch to be positive 5 volts. So now we can control the voltage range by twisting this knob. So in doing this, we get a few different sequencing options. If we turn this back up, we can twist this knob, and now it plays in reverse. If we keep going up to the middle, it's going to ping pong. Go forward, it's going to play randomly. And of course we can twist these knobs and change everything all in one go. So obviously that's pretty neat stuff. Now what I'm going to do is unplug the LFO that we're using to clock this, and we'll just take out the mode CV for the time being. And let's look at how to sort of set this up so that it plays nicely with your other pieces of gear. Now I've got the deluge set up over here, and it's sending MIDI over to my AE Modular rack. If we were to just take the bus clock from this and plug it into the clock of our sequencer, Press play. It's going ridiculously fast, and the deluge is only playing at 120 beats per minute, which is obviously not lining up. So that is what the MIDI clock divider is for. So we can take bus clock from the MIDI clock divider, plug it into our clock. We'll also make sure that bus start is going into reset, so that when I stop the deluge, it resets everything and everything stays nice and lined up. And then we can take the output of our MIDI clock divider and plug it into our clock. And then unless you're trying to do some polyrhythmic stuff with these top outputs like what we explored before, you probably want to take bus stop and plug it into the reset, so that every time we stop it, it's going to reset. Or sorry, bus start. So if I press play, sorry, it is bus stop. I always get those confused. Press play, there we go. It's moving along quite nice. We can speed this up a little bit. If I press stop, it always goes back to the start of our sequence. Now what I'm going to do is quickly set up a drum beat on my deluge over here so that we can hear it syncing up quite nicely. And maybe we'll just turn down the pitch of this and use this as a bass line. We can even side this to our drum track using the deluge, which is very handy. And I mean, we could do this with any other oscillator that we want to. Maybe we'll switch this over to be the 2-os drive. And we can switch the playback direction. And now we can even control the speed of our sequencer using the clock divider. Might want to open up the envelope. We can speed it up again. So yeah, I think that you're starting to get the idea of the different things that you can do with this sequencer. You can use it for gates, you can use it for pitch sequencing, you can use it just for the raw CV output of this thing and use that to control maybe filter changes. I mean, we could even try something like that actually. Let's bring the raw CV over to a second attenuator over here. Well, we don't even need to do that. We can just plug it straight into here because I always forget the wasp filter's got an attenuator built in. And let's have a listen. Oh, yeah. Turn this on. There you go, just to make the sound cooler. We could even plug this into our delay module because I love the sound of this delay module with that oscillator. And let's not forget that we can use things like quantizers, which I've got set up in the EuroPi over here. We can plug that into the analog input and then take the output of that quantizer and hook it up to the pitch input on our oscillator. But when doing that, just keep in mind that you're probably going to want to trigger it with something as well. So we'll use the digital input of this, and we'll just use one of the gate outputs of our sequencer. So now I think this is set up to play the C Dorian scale. So let's have a listen. Add a little bit of reverb to this. And then we can tie everything together with a bit of compression and saturation on the Zoya. These knobs around to change up the pattern. I guess the only other thing I have left to say about this is feel free to experiment with what you can get away with just having the one sequencer in here, because it was the only sequencer I had for a very long time. I was using it to set up gates and then use the pitch sequencer to sequence different things in my rack. And you know, if we just tuned one of these oscillators like a third or a fifth above the first one that we're sequencing and sequence them with the same things, you can get some really cool chord-like sounds out of it too, which is really something. I guess what I'm really trying to say is, yeah, even though this thing is tiny, it packs a punch and it's extremely useful. Nowadays, I definitely find myself using the Euclid grid for a lot of triggering sort of stuff, but as terms of pitch goes, this gives you a lot of really cool control, and it's really great for live performance because it's kind of like set and forget in a way. With all of that said, I hope that you enjoyed the demo patches that are about to play for you. And for now, hit the like if you like, and if you don't, tell me why. Please subscribe, check me out on Patreon, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.